Something has been whispering across human history, so quietly we almost missed it. It began in the sky, long before cities, long before kings, long before we learned how fragile our world could be. Every ancient culture on Earth separated by oceans, separated by millennia told the same impossible story. And the deeper you look, the more it feels like a message someone wanted us to remember. But the strangest part, this message didn't begin with writing. It began with memory. And memory, unlike stone, does not lie. Welcome back to Sleeping Historian, where we explore the moments history wants us to forget. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear may challenge everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. Now, take a deep breath, because the sky is about to open. Across deserts, mountains, and continents, humanity's oldest stories all point upward, as though our ancestors were trying to remind us of something we've forgotten. Imagine this: cave artists in Africa, painting towering beings with bulbous heads. Aboriginal elders in Australia, describing visitors wrapped in glowing halos. Hopi storytellers recalling ant people who saved humanity from fire and flood. Cultures that never met, languages that never mixed, yet they all spoke of visitors and they all said those visitors came from the sky. Coincidence? Imagination? Or evidence of something far older, something far more advanced? Something deliberate? If you want more deep dives like this, drop a like and share your thoughts in the comments, because this story is only beginning, and your curiosity keeps these mysteries alive. The first witnesses before there were empires, before there were temples, before there was even language, there were witnesses. Imagine a world 12,000 years ago, a world fresh out of an ice age, a world where survival was everything, and yet something extraordinary shook these early peoples deeply enough that they picked up stones, charcoal, and pigments to carve the memory into caves. Why? Because whatever they saw terrified them, or inspired them, or both. High in the Algerian Sahara, in a region called Tassili Nasr, 15,000 ancient paintings cling to the walls of hidden canyons. Once this place wasn't desert, it was a grassland paradise filled with lakes and wildlife. Hunters, families, entire communities carved their lives into stone like a diary. But within those carvings, something stands out. Beings who don't look human. Beings with rounded heads, featureless faces, and what look like helmets. Beings connected by strange tubes hovering above the ground. Beings so vivid that even modern archaeologists admit they appear mechanical. Why would hunter-gatherers paint beings with equipment? Why would they paint helmets when helmets didn't exist? Why would they paint cables? The most iconic figure is called the Great Martian God, nickname given by early explorers because it looked more like a space traveler than a shaman. Archaeologists dismissed these figures as visions or rituals, but then again, the artists were consistent. Their proportions were deliberate. Their style was too clean, too steady, too confident, like they weren't imagining these beings. They were remembering them. The people of Tassili didn't carve dreams. They carved what they saw, and they wanted the future to know. But here's where the story gets even stranger. The same beings appear where they shouldn't, across the ocean, 8,000 miles away. The Aboriginal people of northern Australia painted the Wandjina massive beings with white faces, black almond eyes, and halos that glow like electric auras. Their bodies are shaped like suits. Their heads are enormous, almost helmet-like, and the story behind them. They came from the clouds. They reshaped the land. They brought rain, law, order, knowledge, and when they were done, they returned to the sky. The Aboriginals still repaint the Wandjina every rainy season to keep their power alive, not because they're myths, but because they're ancestors who will return. Do you feel the pattern forming? Two cultures, on opposite sides of the world, describing the same beings, helmeted, glowing, descending from above, teaching humanity how to live. But these aren't the only ones. Let's cross yet another ocean, the Italian Alps and the rays of light. Carvings in Val Camonica, high in the Italian Alps, show figures with round helmets and beams of light shooting from their heads. They hold objects that look like energy tools. Their bodies glow. Their helmets circle their heads like mechanical aureolas. They stand beside symbols that resemble stars, almost like constellations. These carvings are 8,000 years old. It's older than the pyramids, older than writing, older than almost everything we know. And yet, they look the same as the ones in Africa, and the ones in Australia. Why? What were these early humans trying so hard to record? The Hopi ant people travel across the world again to North America. The Hopi people speak of the ant people who saved humanity not once but twice from world-ending disasters, first a great fire, then a global flood. These beings weren't insects. They were tall, dark, strong, with elongated heads and large eyes. They lived underground and emerged only when the world collapsed. The Hopi say the ant people guided survivors into deep caverns, sheltered them until the danger passed, and then returned to the stars. And the Hopi don't call this mythology, they call this history. But what's even more astonishing, the Hopi story mirrors stories in Africa, Australia, Europe, Asia, all speaking of beings who descend, beings who teach, beings who protect, beings who return to the sky. How many coincidences does it take before it stops being coincidence? The Brazilian giants in the rainforests of Brazil, ancient cave paintings show small humans standing beneath towering figures with elongated heads and long arms. The same disproportionate body shape appears again and again and again around the world. The local tribes call them the Carahas, the ones who taught their ancestors how to plant crops and understand the seasons. They came from the sky. They left once their work was done. And the paintings, they show beams, vertical lines descending from above. Not rain, not sunlight, beams, the kind of beams we would associate with descent. You're starting to see the picture, aren't you? The Sand Bushman's radiant beings now go to southern Africa. The Sand Bushmen painted narrow glowing beings surrounded by energy lines, like their bodies radiated heat or light. Thousands of years later, the sands still tell the same story. During times of drought, beings came down from the heavens. They taught, they healed, they guided, then they left. So, let's pause for a moment. Every one of these cultures lived thousands of miles apart. Every one had no contact with one another. Every one developed their own language, symbols, rituals, and myths independently. Yet every one described round heads, glowing bodies, large eyes. Long limbs, helmets, light-filled descent, knowledge from the sky, departure into the heavens. Is this imagination or memory? The global pattern, if these depictions were random symbols, we'd expect different shapes, different ideas, different gods, but they're not random. They're near identical. They repeat with frightening precision. Descent gives teaching, gives departure. Disaster gives visitors, gives knowledge. Ignorance gives contact, gives civilization. This is the pattern that spans the globe. And once you understand this pattern, you start seeing it everywhere. From the Sumerians' winged gods guiding humanity, to the Egyptians' luminous sky beings, to the Mayan feathered serpents arriving in shining craft. This is why so many researchers began to question, what if these weren't gods at all? What if they weren't angels, demons, or spirits? What if they were people or beings who knew more than we did and simply arrived before their time? But the story doesn't stop with paintings, doesn't stop with oral traditions, doesn't even stop with myth. Because after the sky beings left, something else appeared, something carved into the earth itself, something too old, too advanced, too deliberate to ignore. And that something stands at the threshold of humanity's forgotten beginning. A structure so old, so impossible, that archaeologists tried for decades to deny what it implied. A structure that predates writing, farming, pottery, and cities. A structure built before human civilization existed, and yet engineered with the precision of an architect. That structure still stands today. It's buried under 20 feet of soil. Guarding a secret older than the pyramids, secret older than agriculture, a secret older than history itself. Next, we go to Göbekli Tepe, and the truth it exposes may forever change the story of humanity. When the sky beings vanished from humanity's earliest stories, something remarkable happened. Almost overnight, the world changed. Hunter-gatherers who had wandered the earth for tens of thousands of years suddenly began building something they had never built before. Monuments, structures, temples, stone circles aligned to the heavens. It's as if someone flipped a switch in the human mind, like a blueprint had been installed. But what triggered that switch? Why then? Why so suddenly? Why everywhere at once? To understand this moment, we must travel to the birthplace of something impossible. A place where stone pillars rise like messages from another age. A place that predates ancient Egypt by 7,000 years. A place older than writing, older than farming, older than human civilization itself. A place called Göbekli Tepe. And once you see what stands there, it's the old explanation that humans learned slowly falls apart instantly. Because someone built Göbekli Tepe with precision that should not have existed in the Stone Age. And when you hear the whole story, you might wonder whether humanity truly built it alone. The mountain that shouldn't exist high on a dusty hill in southeastern Turkey, a strange mound sat untouched for thousands of years. Villagers grazed animals there, kids played on it. Archaeologists walked past it without interest. To them, it looked like nothing, a pile of dirt. But in 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt brushed away the soil and froze in disbelief. Beneath the dirt, he uncovered the top of a massive limestone pillar. Carved by human hands, he dug deeper, then deeper still. And suddenly, the ground began revealing a structure so old, so advanced, it shattered everything we thought we knew about our past. Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a temple, it wasn't just a structure. It was the first cathedral on Earth built 12,000 years ago. Let that sink in. 12,000 years. That's 6,500 years before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before writing, before pottery, before cities, before agriculture. This wasn't supposed to exist. And yet it did. The impossible pillars. Schmidt uncovered circle after circle of enormous stone pillars, each carved with animals, symbols, and abstract designs. Some pillars weigh 20 tons, as heavy as a modern military tank. But here's the real shock. These pillars were carved with mathematical precision by people who didn't even have metal tools. Think about that. No wheels, no writing, no farming, no stable settlements. And yet, perfect stone architecture. How could nomadic hunter-gatherers, people who followed migrating animals, organize the labor, design the structure, and engineer stones weighing 20 to 50,000 pounds? Some researchers believe they couldn't, at least, not alone. Every pillar at Göbekli Tepe is shaped like a T, like a humanoid figure. Arms and hands are carved along the sides. Belts, loincloths, animal emblems, every detail looks intentional, not artistic. These weren't random stones. They were statues. They were beings. They were memories in stone, but memories of who? And why did the builders bury the entire site on purpose when they finished Itaz if they were trying to hide something from the future? That question haunts archaeologists to this day. The mysterious burial Göbekli Tepe was not destroyed by nature. It wasn't abandoned. It wasn't ruined. It was intentionally buried beneath hundreds of thousands of tons of soil. Massive coordinated burial effort. Why bury a masterpiece? Why bury the oldest temple in the world? Why bury something that took thousands of years to build? Unless the builders didn't want someone else to find it. Unless it wasn't meant for us. Unless it marked a moment in history when something ended or something began. Schmidt proposed something radical. Göbekli Tepe wasn't a temple at all. It was a training ground, a school created by someone who knew things humanity wasn't supposed to know yet. But if that's true, who were the teachers? The knowledge that shouldn't exist. Göbekli Tepe's pillars align with constellations, particularly Orion, Sirius, and the Milky Way. The same constellations worshipped in ancient Egypt, Sumer, Mesoamerica, and even China. But here's the paradox. Hunter-gatherers weren't supposed to understand the stars. They weren't astronomers. They weren't mathematicians. They weren't architects. So how did they align a temple with cosmic precision thousands of years before agriculture? That's like discovering a smartphone inside a cave from the Stone Age. Something doesn't add up. Either our ancestors were far more advanced than we imagined, or they weren't working alone. In many indigenous legends from the Turkey region, there are stories about luminous beings who descended from the sky after a great flood to teach survivors how to begin again. Is Göbekli Tepe their fingerprint? Their message? Their monument to the world they rebuilt, before disappearing once more? Or is it a memory left behind by a civilization we lost to time? These questions lead us deeper into the most dangerous idea in archaeology, a forbidden hypothesis that could rewrite global history. But before we go there, we must look at what comes next. Because Göbekli Tepe was only the beginning. The first cities emerged too fast after Göbekli Tepe was built. Something miraculous happened. Around 9,500 to 8,000 BC, Just a couple of thousand years later, humanity suddenly exploded with knowledge. Aiming emerged, architecture emerged, large-scale settlements emerged. Pottery, weaving, irrigation, everything appeared nearly at once. Archaeology calls this the Neolithic Revolution, as if humans woke up one morning and said, "Let's completely change everything about how we live." But why did early humans suddenly decide to stop wandering? Why build cities? Why farm when hunting was easier? Why adopt complicated lifestyles requiring planning, calendars, and astronomical timing? Unless someone showed them how. And if someone did, it would explain why civilizations around the world told the same story. The gods came down and taught us. But these gods didn't act like divine beings. They acted like instructors, engineers, scholars, astronomers, architects. In other words, they acted like people. People from where? Whose people? This question becomes even more disturbing when we look at what happened next. The rise of Sumer, too sudden to ignore. By 4000 BC, around 6 to 7,000 years after Göbekli Tepe, the world's first true civilization emerged in Mesopotamia. Sumer, they invented writing, cities, mathematics, law, irrigation, medicine, astrology, complex calendars, monumental ziggurats aligned to the sky. But here's the problem. There is no slow progression, no primitive transitional period, no learning curve. Sumer appears out of nowhere, fully formed, like someone pressed start. Sumerians didn't claim they invented this knowledge. They insisted it was given to them by the Anunnaki beings who came from the heavens to the earth, their first kings. Also said to be part divine, part human. Their earliest tablets, filled with descriptions of sky chariots, fiery descendings, and gods arriving in groups. Historians say these are just myths. But are they? Let's look at the pattern. Göbekli Tepe gives sudden agriculture, agriculture gives sudden cities, cities gives sudden writing, writing gives sudden astronomy, astronomy gives sudden monumental architecture. What caused this chain reaction? Why does it repeat exactly the same way across Egypt, Mesoamerica, the Indus Valley, China, and the Andes? What? Could all of these cultures be remembering the same event from different perspectives? When the sky opened, when the visitors came, when humanity changed. And if they were visitors, where did they go? Before we answer that, one more structure shatters the timeline. Let's leave Mesopotamia for now, because there's a site that pushes the story even further back. A place hidden on an island that was once connected to the mainland before a global flood swallowed its shores. A place older than most textbooks admit. A place that reveals the next layer of the mystery. Civilizations rise. Civilizations fall. But sometimes, the ocean buries the truth before the world ever knows it existed. And that's where our journey takes us next. Because while Göbekli Tepe rewrites the story of humanity on land, another ancient site is rewriting it beneath the waves on the shores of India and Sri Lanka, a place where temples, bridges, and stone structures stretch across the sea, as if guiding us toward a forgotten chapter in human history. A chapter older than the pyramids, older than Mesopotamia, older even than Göbekli Tepe itself. And when you see what lies there, you might find yourself wondering, was the world far more advanced 12,000 years ago than we ever realized? And if so, who taught them it? Let's dive into one of the strangest, most ancient mysteries on Earth, the drowned city at the edge of India. Off the coast of Tamil Nadu lies the ghostly outline of a submerged world, its walls, courtyards, and temples sitting under 50 feet of water. This city is known as Dwarka, name from ancient Indian texts, but only recently rediscovered through underwater archaeology. And here's the shocking part. The ruins are dated anywhere between 9,000 to 12,000 years old. That's older than Göbekli Tepe, older than Stonehenge, older than the known age of cities. Before the last ice age melted, when sea levels were 400 feet lower, this city thrived. Then the waters rose, and the city disappeared, forgotten for nearly 10,000 years. But this drowned world isn't the strangest discovery, not by a long shot, because 18 miles away, a trail of stone links India to Sri Lanka, an ancient structure so massive, so controversial, that modern science still debates whether nature built it, or something else did. Let's step onto Adam's Bridge. the bridge that shouldn't exist. Stretching more than 30 miles, Adam's Bridge looks like a chain of sandbars. But underwater scans reveal something different. Perfectly placed limestone blocks arranged in a continuous path. Sitting atop naturally formed coral forming a leveled track between two countries, the strangest detail. The stones date to around 7,000 years old. The coral beneath them is much older, meaning the materials were placed intentionally. Someone used coral as a base, and set stones, massive ones, on top of it. India's ancient epic, the Ramayana, claims the bridge was built by an advanced group of beings led by Rama using knowledge granted by divine visitors. Mainstream historians laugh and call it mythology. But then, why does the myth match geological evidence? Why does the myth describe advanced engineering? Why does the myth speak of flying craft called vimanas, weapons of light, and celestial instructors who taught human science before disappearing? Are these really myths? Or memories from a lost civilization? Adam's Bridge is just the beginning. Because just inland from this ancient bridge, another mystery rises from the sand. One so strange that archaeologists still argue over what destroyed it. Some say a cyclone. Some say a tsunami. Some say a disaster so great it erased an entire civilization overnight. This place is Danishkodia, the ghost town, and its destruction may be a clue to a catastrophe the ancient world remembered and feared. Danishkodia, the city claimed by the sea. Once a peaceful coastal town, Danishkodia now sits broken, its walls cracked. Its structures tilted, its shoreline twisted as if from unimaginable force. On a stormy night in 1964, a cyclone annihilated the entire town. Waves rose higher than buildings. Winds shredded concrete. In a single night, Danishkodia became a ruin. But beneath the modern destruction lies something far older. Stone foundations older than any known settlement in the region.
Evidence of advanced coastal planning.
And rumors passed quietly from generation to generation that this land suffered a great flood in prehistoric times. A flood that echoes the global stories we've already heard. The Hopi destruction by fire and water. The Sumerian flood of Ziusudra and Atrahasis. The biblical flood of Noah. The Hindu flood of Manu. The Egyptian years of darkness. The Greek flood of Deucalion. Were these just myths or eyewitness accounts of the same ancient event, a global disaster around 12,000 years ago when the last ice age ended and sea levels rose more than 400 feet? If so, then entire civilizations could have vanished beneath the waves. Civilizations that may have built Adam's Bridge, created underwater cities like Doraka, and left behind knowledge that appeared suddenly in Egypt, Sumer, India, China, and the Americas. This paints a picture we cannot ignore. A global civilization destroyed by rising seas. Survivors scattering across continents. Visitors, gods, teachers, instructors, remembered as luminous beings. But what connects India, Danishkodia, and ancient legends even more strongly are the texts describing flying machines long before humans invented wheels. Let's go to the ancient Sanskrit writings, because what they describe sounds less like mythology and more like technology. It's Vimana's ancient flying machines with modern details in the Mahabharata, Ramayana, and Vedas. There are references to Vimana's flying craft used by gods and heroes. These aren't vague metaphors. They are described with startling mechanical detail. Multi-tiered structures, propulsion powered by fire. Vertical takeoff, the ability to hover flight between cities, mountains, and stars, weapons that produce blinding light explosions, louder than thunder, shockwaves that devastate landscapes.
Ow.
One passage describes a weapon that sounds eerily similar to nuclear blast effects, complete with radiation poisoning and shadows burnt into stone. For centuries, scholars insisted these were poetic metaphors. But now, as we uncover ancient structures older than civilization, underwater cities from 12,000 years ago, and global depictions of sky beings, those metaphors suddenly sound like memories. If ancient people witnessed flying craft, how would they describe them? Wheels of fire? Chariots of the gods? Dragons of light? Feathered serpents descending from the sky? Nearly every culture uses the same imagery. Nearly every culture describes the same sounds. Thunder, fire, wind, blinding rays. Nearly every culture says the same thing. They came from above. They taught us. They left. They promised to return. But memory alone doesn't build temples. Someone built monuments that reach toward the heavens across the world, almost all at once. And the precision of those monuments suggests more than imagination. It suggests instruction. The rise of monuments after the Great Flood, after the Ice Age ended, after sea levels rose, after coastal civilizations were wiped out, the survivors began rebuilding. And suddenly, megalithic temples appeared, astronomical alignments appeared, precision stonework appeared, sacred geometry appeared, agriculture appeared, large-scale architecture appeared. Egypt built pyramids aligned to Orion. Mesopotamia built ziggurats as stairways to the heavens. The Indus Valley built grid-based cities with plumbing. China built astronomical observatories. Mesoamerica built pyramids aligned to solstices and equinoxes. South America built stone structures carved with millimeter precision. And the age of these structures becomes even more suspicious when we consider one thing. Civilization did not develop slowly. It appeared suddenly, everywhere, at the same time. This isn't how human innovation works, but it is how a reboot works. If a global advanced civilization existed before the flood, if survivors carried fragments of that knowledge to far regions, then the sudden rise of pyramids, cities, writing, astronomy, and mathematics makes perfect sense. But here's the twist. Many ancient cultures claim that the survivors didn't come alone. They arrived with luminous beings from the sky, beings who guided them, beings who taught them, beings who built with them. Are these beings the same ones carved in caves across Africa, Australia, Europe, and the Americas? Were they the same visitors described in India's Vedic texts? Did they help rebuild civilization after a global disaster? And if so, where did they go? Their departure marks one of the greatest turning points in human history. Because once they left, something began to fade. Knowledge became myth, science became legend, teachers became gods. And humanity was left trying to remember what it had lost. The sky beings fade. But their signature remains. There is a moment when ancient history becomes sacred story, when facts become symbols and memories become myth. But the physical world still remembers. And the monuments that followed the flood carry clues. From Stonehenge to Teotihuacan, from Puma Punku to Angkor Wat, from Egyptian pyramids to Easter Island statues, the same shapes appear again and again. Alignment with Orion reverence for serious astronomical precision, geometric perfection, megalithic stonework. No primitive tools could create, and these were not isolated developments. They form a global network of knowledge. A network someone once understood, a network someone once taught, a network someone once used. In this world, the world that existed before the flood, may have built something even more astonishing, something we haven't uncovered yet. Something waiting under the oceans. Something older than 12,000 years. This brings us to the most controversial idea yet. The visitors may have come from a civilization that existed on Earth long before the Ice Age ended. It's not extraterrestrials, not gods, but humans from a chapter of history we lost completely. And the evidence for this possibility leads us to the most precise stonework on the planet. Stone that modern engineers struggle to replicate. Stone that appears cut by machines. Stone that suggests advanced tools. Long before metal existed, stone from the mountains of Peru. Stone from the deserts of Bolivia. Stone from a site called Puma Punku Place, so advanced archaeologists still have no explanation for it. And that's where we go next. As the world recovered from the Great Flood at the end of the Ice Age, small groups of survivors began rebuilding, but not from scratch. They built with memory. They built with fragments of a world that once flourished and then drowned. And wherever they rebuilt, the same shapes rose again. Perfect angles, carved stones, astronomical alignments, and impossibly advanced engineering. But among all the ruins scattered across the earth, none are as baffling or as fearsome as the stones sitting high in the Andes. Because here in the thin air of Bolivia and Peru, the mountain ridges hide something that should not exist. Something that suggests the flood didn't just wipe out villages, it wiped out knowledge. Knowledge we still can't recreate today. Let me take you to the most technologically puzzling site in the ancient world. A place that whispers in the wind. A place that engineers fear. A place that historians avoid. Welcome to Puma Punku, the stone gateway to impossibility. Puma Punku is not just a ruin. It is the signature of a lost civilization written in stone, so precise, so perfect, that even our laser-cutting technology struggles to replicate it. The site lies more than 12,000 feet above sea level, near Lake Titicaca region, with harsh winds, freezing nights, and unpredictable storms. Even today, moving large stones up this terrain is nearly impossible. But someone thousands of years ago managed to drag blocks weighing up to 100 tons to the top of the plateau. Now pause and think about that. 100 tons in thin air. Before the wheel existed, before metal tools existed, before cities existed, how? How did Stone Age people move a block that modern cranes would choke on? Some archaeologists claim they used ropes and manpower, but ropes do not explain the precision, because when you look closer, really close, you see something shocking. The impossible engineering of the H-blocks scattered across Puma Punku are the famous H-blocks, geometrically perfect stones carved with right angles so sharp they feel like they were molded rather than chiseled. Modern architects say the H-blocks are so precise, they appear to be part of a modular system like ancient Lego bricks designed to interlock with one another. Each block has perfectly straight cuts, features drilled holes that penetrate with uniform diameter, includes interior corners sharper than any primitive tool could create, uses angles measured to the millimeter, and appears to have been shaped by high-speed machinery. But here's the twist. No metal tools have ever been found from the era Puma Punku is believed to be built. None. Not bronze, not copper, not iron. So how did they cut stones harder than steel? The tools that archaeologists say didn't exist. Laser imaging shows that some cuts appear almost machined, smooth surfaces that defy traditional chiseling. So we ask again, as Sleeping Historian always encourages us, did Stone Age humans really do this alone? Were they copying something they once saw? Something that belonged to a world lost to the flood? Local tradition has an answer, and it's not a small one. The legend of Viracocha, the bearded god who walked the Andes. Across the Andes, from Peru to Bolivia, indigenous people tell the story of Viracocha, tall, pale, bearded teacher who appeared after a great catastrophe. He found humanity starving, desperate, broken. He taught them how to build, how to shape stone, how to measure the stars, how to rebuild society. When his work was done, he left across the ocean, promising to return. The Spanish chroniclers were stunned when they heard this story. Why? Because the indigenous people described Viracocha as bearded and wearing long robes, features they had never seen before. European contact. So who was this mysterious teacher? How did he know so much? Was he one of the survivors from a drowned civilization? Or was he something else? Something connected to the sky beings carved in caves around the world? We can't answer yet, but the stones of Puma Punku suggest this teacher spoke a language of engineering far more advanced than the world around him. Even today, experts debate whether it's possible that the structure was built more than 12,000 years ago, before the Great Flood, if true. Puma Punku wasn't just a temple, it was a remnant of the world that came before. And the Andes hold more clues. Tiwanaku, a city built by memory, not invention, beside Puma Punku, sits Tiwanaku, a vast complex once considered the cradle of Andean civilization. But the deeper archaeologists dig, the more they realize Tiwanaku didn't grow slowly like normal cities. It appeared suddenly, large, organized, astronomically aligned, and built with stones so heavy modern equipment can barely move them. The Gateway of the Sun, one of its most iconic monuments, is carved from a single block of stone weighing more than 10 tons, with reliefs and figures etched with microscopic precision. The carvings depict celestial calendars, star cycles, and a mysterious central figure surrounded by symbols that match constellations visible 12,000 years ago. Why would a primitive culture know that? Unless they inherited the knowledge, unless they were continuing a tradition, unless they were building a memory, not a city. Even the layout of Tiwanaku follows geometric patterns, like they understood mathematics that wouldn't appear in the Western world until millennia later. Something strange is going on here. And it doesn't end in the Andes, the mysterious megaliths of Baalbek. Travel across the world to Lebanon, thousands of miles away, and you find a site that raises the same terrifying question: who moved the stones? At Baalbek, beneath a Roman temple, lie the largest building blocks ever placed by humans. The stone of the pregnant woman to 1,000 plus tons, the trilithon blocks, 800 plus tons each. Several others, over 1,200 tons. Let that settle in. 12 tons. That's heavier than Boeing 747 space shuttle. Destroyer warship sections, railroad locomotives, fully loaded semi-trucks. How did ancient humans move this? Why build something so enormous? Why place stones that even modern cranes struggle with? And here's the real catch. These massive stones lie beneath Roman construction, meaning they belong to a civilization older than Rome, much older. Local legend says giants placed the stones under the guidance of sky beings after a global flood. Historians laugh. But engineers don't. Because no, not the Romans, not the Greeks, not even modern contractors, can explain how the stones were lifted, transported, leveled, and set with such precision. Unless the builders had technology we lost, unless Baalbek is a fingerprint of the same lost civilization that built Puma Punku, unless the flood destroyed more than cities, it destroyed knowledge. But the puzzle doesn't end there, because the next place on our journey is neither in South America nor the Middle East. It sits deep in Asia. A place so enormous, so meticulously engineered, it rivals the pyramids in grandeur and astronomical planning. A place shaped like the cosmos itself. A place that suggests a blueprint handed down from ancient teachers. This place is Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat, a temple that mirrors the stars rising from the jungles of Cambodia. Angkor Wat is the largest religious monument on Earth, a sprawling maze of towers, moats, and causeways carved with impossible symmetry. But what makes Angkor Wat so mysterious is not just its size. It's the cosmic precision built into every stone. The entire complex is aligned with the solstices, the equinoxes, the path of the Milky Way, the constellation, Draco, the celestial serpent Naga, and the movement of the stars 1,000 years before the temple was built. In other words, Angkor Wat was built to mirror the heavens, a map of the sky carved into the earth. But how did the Khmer builders know this? Why did they design a structure readable from the sky? And more importantly, who gave them the blueprint? According to Khmer inscriptions, Angkor Wat was created using the pattern of the gods, an ancient design meant to replicate the heavens on earth. That same phrase appears in Egypt, in Sumer, in the Indus Valley, in China, in the Americas, everywhere. Ancient people weren't just building monuments, they were rebuilding memories. Memories of how the world was shaped, memories of who guided them, memories of a past that didn't survive the flood. But before we reach the shocking climax, before we uncover the site that proves a lost civilization truly existed, we need to ask a dangerous question. Are these monuments just tributes, or are they messages? If you stand atop Angkor Wat at sunrise, you watch the sun align perfectly with the central tower exactly as the builders intended. If you stand at the base of Baalbek's trilithon, you feel the impossible weight of knowledge crushed beneath centuries. If you walk among Puma Punku, you feel like you're walking through the remains of a technology we do not understand. If you wander Göbekli Tepe, you sense a memory intentionally buried, maybe to protect us, maybe to protect itself. These structures feel less like places of worship, more like markers. Markers placed across the earth, markers aligned to the same stars, markers pointing to something. But what? What were these ancient people trying to communicate? That humanity began with contact? That knowledge was given, not discovered? That a world came before ours and was erased? These ideas aren't fringe theories anymore. Archaeology itself is being forced to confront them as new evidence surfaces. Because the final piece of the puzzle, the moment where myth, archaeology, astronomy, and global flood legends collide, lies in a place far older, far stranger, far more ancient than anything we've discussed. A place that predates every civilization known, a place intentionally hidden, a place whose carvings show something impossible. We return now to the beginning, to the place that started everything, to the oldest monument on Earth, to the structure that proves humanity did not rise alone. In Part 5, we reach the conclusion, the twist, the truth that Sleeping Historian has been guiding you toward since the beginning, the evidence that a lost civilization once existed, and the reason their story vanished. Humanity loves to believe it remembers everything, but the truth, we remember almost nothing. For thousands of years, we believed civilization began only 5,000 years ago in Sumer, Then Göbekli Tepe emerged twice as old. Then underwater ruins appeared older still. Then megaliths, star maps, and technological anomalies surfaced across the world, each older than the last. Each one whispered the same warning. Your story did not begin where you think it began, and if that's true, then humanity did not rise alone. We rose after something else fell. Now, to finish our journey, we return to the oldest structure on Earth, a place so ancient, so deliberate, and so astronomically aligned. It forces even the most cautious historian to admit something was happening on this planet long before recorded history. We go back to Göbekli Tepe, but this time we see what it truly means. Not a temple, not a sanctuary, or not a shrine, but a warning. A monument built by the last generation of a world we lost. And what they carved into those stones may explain everything we've uncovered. The carvings that shatter the timeline, the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, are covered in animals, foxes, scorpions, lions, vultures. At first, archaeologists dismissed them as symbolic. But recent research shows the carvings match constellations exactly as they appeared in the sky around 10,950 BCE. That's the same date geologists assign to the Younger Dryas Kulina, catastrophic global event caused by a massive comet. Impact, volcanic winter, or solar disruption. In other words, Göbekli Tepe may be recording the event that destroyed the world before ours. Think about that. Is civilization advanced enough to build perfect stone circles, mapping the sky, capturing constellations, leaving behind cosmic warnings? Because they knew what was coming. But there's something even more shocking. One pillar the vulture stone appears to show, an impact symbol, falling fragments, birds carrying spheres, a headless human, and a date encoded through constellations. This is not random artwork. This is scientific memory. It might be the oldest record of a global disaster ever carved on humanity's earliest attempt to warn the future. And the warning didn't just stop at Göbekli Tepe. It spread. Because after this carving came something we cannot ignore. The survivors began building star maps worldwide. Egypt aligned its pyramids to Orion. Mesoamerica aligned its temples to Venus. China aligned its palaces to the purple forbidden star. Andean cultures aligned their gateways to the Milky Way. Angkor Wat mirrored Draco and the celestial serpent. Why would all these civilizations, even those that never matreplicate the sky in stone, what were they trying to remember? What were they trying to warn us about? Sleeping historian asks you to consider this. Maybe they weren't worshipping the stars. Maybe they were tracking them. Because the last time the sky changed, the world drowned. The flood that wiped the earth clean, every civilization on earth remembers a flood. Every single one. Not a local flood, not a river flood. A cosmic flood, something that drowned continents. The Sumerians called it the flood of Ziusudra. The Hebrews called it the flood of Noah. The Greeks called it Deucalion's flood. The Hindus told of Manu and the deluge. The Mayans told of the world destroyed by water. The Aboriginals spoke of the water serpent swallowing the land. The Dogon people spoke of rising seas, ending an era. Why do cultures separated by oceans all describe the same event? Because around 12,000 years ago, sea levels rose more than 400 feet, not in centuries, in decades. Imagine that. Entire coastlines gone, cities gone, civilizations lost. And if the world before the flood lived on those coasts, we may never find their remains. Underwater is where history sleeps. The oceans hold secrets deeper than any museum. Here's what we have found. Submerged cities in India, stone temples under the Mediterranean, underwater pyramids in Japan, drowned walls off Cuba, flooded monuments off China, and every new discovery pushes civilization further back, closer to the world that existed before the flood. Bringing fragments of genius that birthed Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, and Mesoamerica. But what about the beings carved on cave walls, the luminous figures, the helmeted giants, the ant people, the winged gods, the feathered serpents? Who were they? Were they part of this lost world? Were they visitors? Were they teachers from an advanced human society? Or something beyond human entirely? The answer lies in the stories they left behind, and the pattern they follow. The pattern of the sky visitors across every continent. The sky beings follow the same life cycle. 1. They arrive after catastrophe. 2. They rebuild the world. 3. They teach agriculture, astronomy, and architecture. 4. They warn humanity about repeating the past. 5. They leave promising to return. The Hopi said the ant people saved them from 2 destructions. The Sumerians said the Anunnaki descended from the heavens after the flood. The Egyptians said Zep-Tepe, the first time, began when gods landed from the sky. The Greeks said the gods rebuilt Olympus after the deluge. The Mayans said the feathered serpent arrived after a great darkness. The Polynesians said sky ancestors returned in shining vessels. The Dogon said the Namo arrived in a spinning craft. Why do all these global myths span the same timeline right after the flood? Why do they all describe the same beings? And why do they all say those beings did not stay? Unless they belong to a world that fell, the lost civilization theory, and why archaeology fears it. The idea of a civilization existing before the flood was once dismissed as fantasy. It not anymore. Göbekli Tepe proved humans were building megaliths long before civilization supposedly began. Underwater ruins proved technologically advanced settlements existed on drowned coastlines. Ancient texts proved global cultures remembered a time of destruction. Star alignments proved a deliberate astronomical system spread across continents. And now, modern scientists believe a comet impact around 10,800 BCE triggered a global flash freeze, flood, and firestorm. In other words, an apocalypse. So what happened before that apocalypse? Here's the theory. Archaeologists dread. An advanced human civilization existed during the Ice Age. It was destroyed. Its survivors became the gods of early cultures. Its knowledge scattered. Its monuments drowned. Its teachers remembered as sky visitors. Not extraterrestrials, not angels, it's people, humans like us. Just from a time we forgot, their world fell. They tried to rebuild ours. And Göbekli Tepe was their final message, a message buried intentionally waiting for us to rediscover it. But the twist is deeper than that, because something else is happening in the modern world, something that feels eerily familiar. Are we repeating their mistake? The civilizations after the flood all warned of one thing. When humanity forgets the sky, catastrophe returns. The Hopi said when people lose their connection to the heavens, the cycle restarts. The Egyptians said the gods left because humans became arrogant. The Indians said the world passes through ages, ending in destruction. The Sumerians said kingship falls from heaven when humans grow corrupt. In every warning, one theme repeats: we were given a second chance. So the question becomes, are we wasting ours? Because for the first time since the Ice Age collapse, humanity controls. Atmospheric change, mass species, extinction, rapid population growth, unchecked technology, weapons capable of global destruction. We are rewriting the climate. We are reshaping landscapes. We are manipulating nature. We are tampering with things we barely understand. Sound familiar? Many believe the last civilization fell for similar reasons. Not by comet, not by gods, but by the consequences of their own brilliance. If the world before the flood reached heights of knowledge and then lost control, the planet may have reset itself. Is that what the ancients were trying to warn us about? Is that why they mirrored the sky in stone so? Future generations never forget how the last world fell? Is that why they recorded cosmic cycles so we would see a catastrophe coming before it was too late? And is that why they buried Göbekli Tepe so? Its message would survive even if they didn't? We can only guess. But the most chilling part is this. Every ancient prophecy says the cycle will repeat. Every single one. And it all depends on the sky. The two eyes to what we were never meant to forget. After everything we've seen, the drowned cities, the star-aligned temples, the massive stones, the luminous beings, the sudden rise of civilization, one conclusion rises above all. Humanity didn't start from zero. We started from memory. A memory the flood tried to erase. A memory the survivors tried to preserve. A memory carved into stone across continents. And that memory is this. We once lived in a world greater than our own, and we lost it. Whether the ancient sky beings were survivors from the lost world, teachers from an advanced culture, or visitors from beyond the earth, their purpose was the same: rebuild, warn, prepare. Remember, Göbekli Tepe is not just a monument. It is a tombstone for a civilization forgotten by time. The reason it still matters is because we are standing where they once stood in the edge of brilliance or collapse. The cycle continues, the sky changes, and history starts again. This time the question is, will we repeat their fate or finally break the pattern? Let me know what you think, and if you want more deep journeys like this, subscribe to Sleeping Historian. You keep the ancient world alive every time you return. Thank you for exploring humanity's forgotten past. And until our next mystery, stay curious.